So Conor McGregor has been found liable for assault under Irish tort law, and despite a few theories why this was the wrong decision, I'm going to go over the evidence that has persuaded me this was in fact the correct decision. There is a degree, in my opinion, of misinformation being spread about this case in some quarters. Although the full transcripts of the trial are not currently available, the closest source of information, I think, comes from the court reporters who are attending the trial and providing play-by-play updates. The reason I think these are likely to be accurate is due to contempt of court laws. Court reporters are only allowed to report what has been said in the courtroom and are not allowed to provide any kind of colour commentary or intentionally incorrect quotes. There are a couple of things that were pseudo-mentioned in court. Several media sources have now reported it, and it was circling around online before the case. But looking at this headline in The Guardian, masked gang broke into home of Conor McGregor accuser, Dublin court was told. Looking at what was said, the plaintiff, as in the now victim Mrs. Hand's home, was invaded by a group of men wearing balaclavas, said Mrs. Hand's lawyer John Gordon. They broke into the plaintiff's bedroom and were driven out by the plaintiff's partner, who suffered a stab wound in the process. Her daughter was in the next room sleeping. We are not laying that at the feet of the defendants or saying they have anything to do with that, he added. We do make the claim that it was not an untargeted attack. It rose from supporters of the first named defendant, Conor McGregor. It was successfully argued by Conor McGregor's lawyer, Remy Farrell, that this evidence should not be admissible, as there was no evidence Conor McGregor had personal knowledge that this was going to happen prior to the incident. In my opinion, there is a legitimate argument there. However, I think it could also set the context of the kind of duress Miss Hand was under, and it could also show her determination in bringing a case that she didn't back down after an incident like that. If you look at another case involving Conor McGregor, looking at this Daily Mail report, arsonists torched car belonging to Irish woman who claimed she was assaulted on Conor McGregor's yacht in Ibiza. It's something of a strange coincidence surrounding Conor McGregor, that those who accuse him of sexual assault seem to end up the victims of other crimes. On this occasion, the alleged victim did drop the case after the arson. On the other side, I should say there was a claim by Conor McGregor that the taxi driver made a statement which was not entered into evidence. You can see a reference to it in this RTE article, which is linked in the description. If you know anything about this and have a trustworthy source, please let me know in the comments. Personally, I'm inclined to think anything in the taxi driver's statement has been exaggerated by Conor McGregor, and I can't see why they wouldn't let him testify if he had anything relevant to say. So now on to the evidence, which probably did convince the jury. I think the best bits of evidence are the fact that Miss Hand was badly bruised, the fact that Conor McGregor's DNA was found on a tampon which was surgically removed, and the fact that Conor McGregor denied knowledge of a tampon, plus I think a general overreaction on his part and lack of credibility in describing the events. One of the strongest pieces of evidence, I think, came from paramedic Ethna Scully. Looking at this article from the BBC during the reporting restrictions, she described Miss Hand as very bruised and said, quote, "I haven't seen someone so bruised, with that intensity of bruising." I have seen various criticisms of Miss Scully's evidence. The first is that there is some dispute over the level of bruising, with some witnesses backing her and others disputing. A second is that there are other explanations proposed by Conor McGregor and other commentators for the bruising. A third criticism is that Miss Scully's testimony is overly dramatic. So first, to start with the idea that Miss Scully had dramatised her testimony, which stems from the idea that as she was a very experienced paramedic, it seems unlikely that she would have never seen such bruising in her career. This idea also ties in with the issue that there are several different accounts as to the level of bruising. I think there is a degree of legitimate criticism here. However, I don't think that necessarily means that everything she says should now be disregarded. It may be the case that she believed Miss Hand's account and was so moved and disgusted by what she heard that she couldn't help herself describing the injuries the way she did. Outside of potentially a slight exaggeration, I can't think of many credible or likely reasons as to why she would have given evidence in bad faith. It's loosely plausible that she is some kind of radical feminist with a very cynical view of men, but there was no evidence of that put forward by McGregor's defence. It's also a fact that she was just one component of the case. Miss Scully's remarks about the bruising are backed by another paramedic called Neil Dempsey. He said, quote, "There was some visible marks in or around her throat." A difference between the two witnesses is that Mr. Dempsey did not do a full body examination, so he wouldn't have been able to confirm or deny the extent of the bruising. There is another witness to the bruising who is, or was in terms of the court case, Miss Hand's GP, Dr. Emma Quinn. Miss Hand went to see her on the day of 19th December, so about 9.5 days after the incident. After being asked to examine Miss Hand's neck, Dr. Quinn said in court, quote, "I felt there was tenderness on the left side of the neck, which was consistent with internal bruising and consistent with the story she told me of being held forcibly on the left side of her neck." This testimony can be found on day 5 of the Irish Mirror's court reports, link in description. I think it will be relevant to note that the witnesses to the bruising have said that it's particularly bad around the neck area when we come on to what Conor McGregor has to say about the bruising. From day 6 of the trial, asked about Miss Hand's bruises, McGregor responds, quote, "I will tell you where she didn't get them from me." When asked about Miss Hand's bruising, Mr. McGregor says the bruises possibly came from her diving into the bath. Shortly after, he says, quote, "I would say sex with me was athletic, physical, and it was prolonged, and it was in a multitude of positions," which to me looks a bit sketchy as it appears in the court report. You wonder if he's attempting to sow doubt as to whether or not the bruising has come from rough sex. However, he's also explicitly said he didn't cause any bruising. Even if you ignore this, the story about the swan dive into the bathtub is, I think, embarrassingly bad. So I imagine it as some kind of front flip gone wrong. I have to say, in my experience, I've tried some outdoor gymnastics. I didn't keep the clips when it went wrong, but generally when it goes wrong, it isn't the kind of thing that results in deep bruising all over the back. If Miss Hand is supposed to have in some way spiked on her neck, or landed neck first, then I think she would be in a bad way. Most likely, I think, if she did land on her neck, then she would develop some kind of whiplash or concussion-like symptoms, which would kill any kind of romantic mood. A reason for the bruising that I have seen some Conor McGregor fans suggest is that Miss Hand was beaten by her boyfriend after he found out she cheated on him. The problem with this idea is that there is a further witness to the bruising called Aylmer Brennan, who Miss Hand saw before she met up with her boyfriend. So at this stage of the case, the only credible reason I can see for the bruising offered is the explanation by Miss Hand that she was battered by Conor McGregor. Looking at Miss or Mrs. Brennan's testimony, which came out on day 4 of the trial, quote, "She had taken off her coat when she first came in, and I saw the bruise on her arms. I helped her take off the jumpsuit and noticed bruised right breast with a scrape on it. She had a bruise on her knee, I think, bruise on her knuckle, scrape on her jaw, red mark on her neck." The account is perhaps slightly inconsistent with the description offered by paramedic Ethna Scully. However, Miss Brennan's account is more inconsistent with the excuses offered by Conor McGregor. The description of bruises on her knee and knuckle are inconsistent with some kind of front flip gone wrong, where she would presumably land with her knuckles and kneecap facing the sky. It's also probable the bruises would still be becoming more visible and prominent at this point. An important question for me in this case is there any evidence that Miss Han was ever actually romantically particularly interested in Conor McGregor? In my opinion, a scorned woman is a type who is more likely to make a false allegation. I have seen some people say she was sending Conor McGregor explicit images, which I think is misinformation, although the exact details of their initial interaction is not completely clear. Looking at the court report, Mr. Farrell says he wants to go back to the picture she put up on her Instagram stories. He asks, is he correct in understanding Miss Han was following McGregor, but he was not following her? Miss Han confirms. He asks if, when she put up a picture, McGregor would not be able to see unless she selected or tagged him. Miss Han says he was one of the people she selected to be able to see it. This version actually makes it sound like there was quite a sly attempt by Miss Han to solicit Conor McGregor's interest, as tagging him in an Instagram story is quite subtle. There is another account of this interaction from a journalist called Claude Amini, who attended the trial and was blogging during the reporting restrictions.
Then they moved on to discussion in relation to her Instagram stories. This was the initial interaction she had with Conor.
In Claude Amini's version, it sounds like she had maybe filtered people who couldn't see it, which may be the custom green circle story you sometimes see on Instagram.
But she had put this picture up and you could select people who could see it.
This particular aspect of the story may justly affect how you see Miss Han, in my opinion. But even if she was trying to get McGregor's attention, I don't think she would have wanted to receive the bruising that she did. I think there are also issues with the credibility of Conor McGregor's version of this interaction. The following is going to come from an online Irish newspaper called The Journal. One red flag with Conor McGregor's evidence is that even though he's admitted to several things, he's not forthcoming in handing over his mobile to the Irish police. In fact, he never hands over his mobile to the Irish police, whereas Miss Han hands over hers, I think, a couple of days or weeks after the incident. If you look at the way Conor McGregor describes Nikita Hand at the time of the incident and immediately preceding, he repeatedly uses the word boisterous. He depicts himself as almost a shrinking violet minding his own business at urinal when Miss Hand forces herself on him, which firstly doesn't exactly sound like the most erotic environment, and secondly sounds like he's overcompensating in protesting his innocence. There's a version of events that I could have believed, although it seems to be increasingly unlikely. That version of events involves Conor McGregor being his usual self, tending to dominate things, not having a boisterous woman almost forcing herself on him. On the flip side of this, some have pointed to Miss Han's story about claiming Conor McGregor told her now she knows what it feels like to tap out in the octagon. I agree with the people who have said they don't think it sounds like something Conor McGregor would say. That being said, I think it's more possible if he's drugged out of his mind, which he apparently was. An alternative explanation is that Miss Han either misheard or misremembered. I find it conceivable Conor McGregor could say something along the lines of "now you know how hard it is in the octagon," with the implication he's the alpha male who gets it done in the octagon. He should be able to do whatever he wants or get laid whenever he wants. Aside from the bruising, the other big bit of evidence came from Dr. Charlotte Murphy, who said that the DNA found on the tampon, which had to be surgically removed from his hand, harboured Conor McGregor's DNA. I'm not going to dwell on this too much, as Conor McGregor has not denied there was a sexual encounter, just the nature of it, and it has been covered elsewhere. Conor McGregor did have a couple of things going for him in his defence. Firstly, there is the issue of the CCTV evidence, which as far as I'm aware, as of posting, has only been seen by those who have an inside knowledge of the case, such as the jury and the lawyers. Apparently, this footage shows Miss Hand kissing Conor McGregor on the arm after the alleged assault, and then also kissing James Lawrence, the other defendant in the case. Some have said that Miss Hand may have been in a state of fear when she kissed McGregor on the arm, which I think sounds credible. Others have suggested the idea of Miss Hand kissing James Lawrence is inconsistent with her story, as it suggests someone looking to party, not someone who has been assaulted. If you go by Miss Hand's recollection of the night of the events, then apparently after the assault there was a decent sized period of time where she was being consoled by James Lawrence. So even though she says she didn't find him attractive, I think this may be an explanation for why she kissed him in some fashion. Looking at the case overall, you have 4 witnesses, the 2 paramedics, her GP, and Omar Brennan, who all support the idea that Miss Hand was badly bruised after her encounter with Conor McGregor. On the flip side, you have the 2 witnesses, Danielle Keeley and James Lawrence, who have mixed in the same circles as Conor McGregor, who support his version of events. Considering the way Conor McGregor or his associates seem to have intimidated witnesses in the past, I don't think it's a stretch to say that Danielle Keeley and James Lawrence were intimidated by Conor McGregor, or in the case of Lawrence, may have been willing to bend his testimony to stick up for a mate. So in conclusion, I think the timeline for the bruising, which is corroborated by a number of witnesses, discredits Conor McGregor's claim that this was a consensual sexual encounter.